All right, let's do another segment of tournament style chess problems. All right. So, well, you know, we got to look at the four things: checks, captures, piece contact, board situation. Board situation jumps out at us that we have kind of a nasty setup going here. Wow, really nice, because we have some kind of vicious assault on his king. You know, so it looks like there's a potential we can't do a discovered check, because if we go knight to f5 check, he can just go knight takes bishop. The discovered check has to go to e6 with a double check so we don't lose our bishop. And one of the things that will happen when we play, for example, knight to e6 check, if he goes king e7, we get bishop f8 check, guarded by the knight, which is guarded by the pawn. Really crazy stuff. So, I mean, I'm thinking it looks like we might have a knight discovery on e6 check, followed by either a knight d6 check or a bishop f8 check. So let's look at this. Brute force technique. Knight e6 check. The knight and bishop both cannot be taken because he has to move his king as double check. So knight e6 double check. King to e8. We'd have knight to d6 check. And he has to go to e7. Or he could go to, wait a second, no, that's right. He has to go to e7 because the knight on e6 guards d8. So, go back to move one. Knight to e6, double check. He has two moves. King e8, king e7. So, king e8, knight d6 check, king e7, bishop to f8, checkmate. Fantastic. So, knight e6 check, king to e7 now. Let's go bishop to f8 check. King to e8, knight d6. Yeah, he's mated. This is an absolute mate. It's just that easy sometimes. Now, it wasn't, for me, too difficult to spot. To me, I would think the difficulty of this problem lies in the kind of the goofy formation of the minor pieces, and just, you got to be double sure. You got to double check your work. All right, let's go see what happens here. Now, in my other videos, you guys who have been around will recognize my gut reaction is always turn the piece endgame into a pawn endgame. So both have 5 pawns. So my gut reaction is to beat the guy in a king and pawn ending. So knight takes knight, king takes knight. Now black needs to do what? So at that point, we have a protected passer on d5. The key thing, good question. So really, if you look at it, the pawns on the king side, on the F and G files, pretty much don't do anything. The action, whatever action there's going to be, lives on the queen side. So my gut reaction, this is the, I'm going to do a visual helper here. You know, if I planned this out in advance, it'd be a lot smoother. What are you going to do? So when I do these videos, here's a secret. I just do it off the cuff. It's all improv. So you see, I'll use my dad's old chess book. Those don't even count. So that's what I do. I'm a wacko. So if we look at this guy, knight takes knight, king takes knight, I'm thinking a5. Because those pawns on the king side don't do anything. a5. the obvious response is if he takes the pawn, pawn takes pawn, we go king to a4, and we're going to clean the a pawns and just cash this so easily with the d5 passer. So taking for him is really not helpful. So we go knight takes knight, king takes knight, a5. Again, if he moves his king, then he's going to have a problem. We're just going to go and bully his a pawn. Pardon me. So let's look at that for a second. Knight takes knight, king takes knight, a5, I don't know, king c7. So you'd have a takes b6, king takes b6. What if we go king to a4? He could play a5. No, it's not that obvious. The question becomes, yeah, that's the thing. Ding, ding, that doesn't work. So, king c7. If he goes that, sorry, that's king to f2. It's not an a pawn. Sorry, I'm looking at it backwards. Happens from time to time. So it's knight takes knight, king takes knight. It's h4. So h4. Right, if he goes king f2, king to h5. I'm sorry, it's h takes g3, king takes g3, king h5. And if he plays h4, then you play e3. And so we're going to win the h pawn. You play like something like king f3, king takes h4, king takes e3. And the problem he runs into is that he can't defend the f pawn. I'm convinced this is winning. That was the other move that was obviously winning for us. Katinga. He can only get in the square of one of those pawns and capture it, and then the other one's gone, as you see. So let's look at this again. This is the dilemma after h3, is that if he goes after the h pawn, you just play e3 check, and there's nothing he could do. This is an old fundamental. This, in fact, was something I saw right from the very beginning. I didn't think he would play this because this is an obvious loss if you've done the homework. So the point of h4 is that g4 is an obvious loss. But you have to have done the homework to see that this is an obvious loss. That's why I was calculating either g takes, which is an obvious loss because of king to h5. You're going to clean both of these pawns. This protected passer is never going to be threatened. So clearly g takes h loses. So king to f2, pawn takes, king to h5. And whatever happens, as soon as our king touches this pawn, we'll jettison the e pawn, capturing this and move to a position where he cannot defend the f pawn. Because we'll be able to move to g3, attacking the f pawn. He'd go to e3, and then we'd go king to g4, and he's going to have to jettison the f pawn. This was the key thing. So there's 3 different ways this can go. All of them lose. But this is the kind of stuff you have to look at, because king and pawn ending this is a super important one, actually. So my gut reaction was the correct one. I want to transform these to king and pawn endings because you just maximize your winning ability if you have done your king and pawn ending homework. That h4 is just a crusher. And like I said, this is an obvious win. Now he can't take the d pawn because you play not takes pawn, which would win too, actually. G takes h3 would win. He cashes and stop him, and we'd win because this is the distant passer. We're going to eat this guy, and then we'll kill these. But g3 would be even better. But you really can't lose this. King takes d5 loses primarily to g3, and even g takes h3 wins. Just a little sloppier. So it doesn't really matter. But these are all things you have to know, all this stuff. It all comes from, and I pound it every time I do a king and pawn endgame, the square of the pawn. There's a square of the pawn, the protected passed pawn, which the D pawn used to be. But he cannot allow us to make another protected passer. That would be just devastating. So when he does this, he's in the square before you push the H pawn. He's in the square of both pawns. Now if it's white to move, he wins. He takes, and then this pawn is toast. But it's not his move, it's our move. You lose. H3. He can't get both of them. He can get one. Just one of those things. So this problem's lesson is to go back and play through each one of these sequences. All right? This is a super problem because this is like 3 problems in one. You get 3 lessons for the price of 1. Only here on YouTube. So H4 is the killer. Set this up on a board for yourself and run through it. H4 is winning because you're going to create, and you might want to write this down. Get a piece of paper, draw yourself a board, and just file this away because this is useful stuff to look back at. This formation, these pawns over here, like I said, they don't count. That's why I used my dad's old tournament chess collection of, it's a collection of his games. I used that to block off the board because that E file and to the right doesn't matter. This is all right here on these 4 files. So H4, I'm sorry, not E. I keep going backwards. Ugh. D, it's D to A, doesn't matter. So H4 crushes because it undermines the pawn chain. The old Nimzovich rule, undermine the pawn chain. But we hit this guy. Doesn't matter. He can defend it on F2. He can push it to G4. He can capture on H4. You have to understand all 3 of those. Right? And the 4th one is if he pushes on G4, which is what happened. We capture. That creates the 4th scenario where he captures on D5 and also loses. So there's 4 instructive scenarios here, all of which are winning for black. And you've got to go through this and look through these. You guys are super lucky because you get to see all 4 of these in one swoop. Myself, in the ancient days of the 80s, had to learn these, one by one by one by one, and not structured like I'm doing it for you here. So you guys are getting it faster. The key is you gotta get it. Doesn't matter how you get it. I got it bit by bit by bit by bit. You guys get 4 for 1. It's fantastic. So that's the scenario here, and that's why you need to go through this. This is super powerful, as you see, because when this problem started, I just looked at this and this automatically was looking great for me.